Thank you, Scott, for joining me today, all the way from Melbourne, which is just wonderful to have this global sort of connection and about a situation that is affecting everyone at the moment. So, Scott, thank you, first of all, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Awesome. And well, I'm going to just get started. So, Scott Stuart is a father to a little boy, and their story of dressing up as Elsa together became a social media phenomenon. Having worked at the Royal Children's Hospital, he saw how important it is for children to feel represented and committed to creating stories of empowerment. He is the author of the best selling My Shadow is Pink and My Shadow is Purple, and has appeared on The Today Show and in such publications as People magazine, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, Pop Sugar, and also Parents.com and more. The book has been challenged and banned in several states, which I still can't believe. And obviously, it's Banned Books Week. So I've got to ask you, first of all, can you tell us about your experience of having your book banned in the US and the impact it's been on you?
Yeah, I didn't really realize. I think when I first started writing, especially those two books, My Shadow is Pink, My Shadow is Purple, I didn't realize the just how much vitriol there is out there for messages of inclusion. So I remember this is going back maybe 2 years. I got an email saying that my book was being challenged by some extreme, state in the US, and I remember thinking, this is just so insane. How could this happen in 2023? And then 2022, 2023, I feel like almost every couple of weeks I receive an email or an alert that my book is being challenged in some way by a really conservative faction in the USA. It's also spread here in Australia a little bit. I was talking at a library and it was just doing a reading for 15, 20 kids, and
Oh.
it had to get cancelled because of a massive right-wing protest, a hate protest, planned, which, I mean, it kind of worked out a little bit because then my books got read in Parliament, and they were on the front page of every newspaper in the country. So I guess it was maybe a good marketing strategy, but it was just so ridiculous. And now it just seems to be escalating.
Mm.
We've just had a teacher, Katie, fired in the USA for reading one of my books in her classroom. And having to go through tribunal and court and all that sort of thing. And I feel as though as we lead into the 2024 US election, I feel as though these sorts of things are going to be the hot topic, and
Mm.
it's just going to get worse over the next year or so.
Oh God, I know it's worrying, isn't it? And I had to ask you about exactly that incident of the teacher in being fired in Georgia, and how did that feel? That must have been bizarre.
Yeah, it was a strange combination of gut wrenching, heartbreaking, but also just a complete, this surely can't be real. You know what I mean? And I think because the American school system is similar but still quite different to the Australian school system, I just didn't realize that one complaining parent could have so much power.
Yeah.
Not just to um, remove their kid from a class that they thought was inappropriate, however they thought it was inappropriate, but to end up having that teacher fired. I
Mm.
just can't imagine, what goes through their mind. I can't imagine why they would want to get rid of a stable, part of their children's lives,
Mm.
in a great teacher just because they don't believe in something that was read. I mean, things in my son's classes, there's lots of things that I don't necessarily agree with, but
Mm.
I'd never try and get the teacher fired because of it. It's really just, it's so upsetting. And as I said, it's just so hard to wrap my head around that this is reality. We've all seen like the movies and the TV shows and read the books about, these sorts of things happen, but I just can't imagine. Sorry, I can't believe that it's happening today and that it's happening to my books, which are just written to help kids feel included. They're just written to add a little bit of representation, make kids feel loved with only the message that it's okay to be yourself. That's the only message. And if you grew up, I mean, half of the people complaining, around my age, and we grew up in the 80s where
Yeah.
every movie was be yourself, So I just don't understand how the pushback has gotten to this level.
Yeah, you're completely right. I'm probably in the same age bracket as you as well. So I remember, Breakfast Club and all of that, and it's all about, you've got problems, but you work it out. So it's really shocking that that was like a American export as well, which is so bizarre.
The American
So
export of be yourself, but
be
now
yourself,
it's,
and now don't be yourself.
well, unless you fit into these categories, and then yourself is wrong. Yeah.
So strange. And I've asked this to other guests as well, but I have to ask, like, what do you think are the underlying reasons behind the book being banned?
Look, I mean, obviously, my books have they're very open to the LGBTQ community. It's representative of people in that community, and so I think right now there is a huge moral panic
Mm,
about the this term is so ridiculous, but like the gender ideology, and it's so insane. But I think that's the big moral panic of today,
mm,
around people being trans, people being gay or bi or just part of that community. There's the huge
mm,
moral panic. And so it's bled into this idea of we must protect our children. And the only way to do that is by harming all the children, by allowing them not to be seen, by not allowing them the care that they need. So that's where I think the main thing is. We went through years of in America, Roe v. Wade, abortion
mm,
being a hot button issue, and that then got removed as an issue, and so now there's an entire side of the political spectrum who doesn't have a talking point anymore, and
mm,
so they need a villain, so that they can run on that issue, and so they have basically chosen the the trans community, the LGBTQ community. They are that side's villain now. And so anything that's related to that, and especially if it touches into the realm of children,
mm,
that's just, that is to be vilified. That is the worst thing. And so that's where I think a lot of it comes from. But I think a secondary piece, which is perhaps the most important piece, being somebody who is a content creator
mm,
online, I understand very well just how much profit there is in online extremism. I
mm,
understand that if you can generate millions and millions of clicks on your or views on your content, that it can be very profitable. And one of the easiest ways to generate an enormous amount of coverage, whether that is just views on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube or through the traditional media, is by having a really extreme view. And so, like, we had a thing here in Australia recently where somebody, there's a book called Welcome to Sex, and it's basically written by a doctor and in
Mm,
consult with doctors, and it's all about the sexual experience.
right.
It breaks down all the myths. It shows exactly how everything works. And it's not a book that sits in the picture book section of the bookstore. It's a book that sits in health, parenting. It sits in its appropriate sections. And so we had a thing here in Australia recently where somebody uh, took that book, took it to the picture book section, and then filmed walking up to it and saying, how is this appropriate for 3-year-olds? And then like flipping through the book, which has diagrams and stuff, and saying, this is what they're showing 4-year-old girls, and so then obviously that becomes a huge media story. That person gets an
Mm,
enormous amount of attention that they otherwise would never have received, and they receive the profits and things like that. And because an entire anybody who doesn't have any media literacy, or a low level of media literacy, or doesn't really follow any of these issues, isn't really informed all that
mm,
well, they'll see that and they'll say, why is this book for 4-year-olds?
mm,
That's and they won't stop for a moment to say, oh, this is a carefully crafted narrative. This video is set up to elicit these feelings and to get views and to create controversy. And so I think that's a major part of this, is that people want to get that media attention. They want to get the profits and that come with like the views and the subscribers and all that sort of thing. And one of the fastest ways is to position things in a really controversial way, even if it's morally reprehensible.
mm. God, that is terrible. I'm sorry. It just beggars belief, doesn't it? It's just like the lengths that people will go to is unbelievable. This
Yeah,
level of
it's
misinformation is like just
yeah.
staggering.
And because you can if you look on any your news site, the things that are getting coverage are not scientifically accurate information. It's misinformation that gets the most coverage.
Mm,
And so there is an entire industry of misinformation, especially around these topics, and especially around children, because children are the most vulnerable in society. That nobody wants children to be hurt. Like, everybody, no matter what your political beliefs, can agree on this. Like, we want to protect our kids,
mm,
and so just framing things as, well, this is about the children, suddenly brings in all of that worry, all of that fear, no matter how completely inaccurate the information is.
God, yeah. No, and they're easy targets because they can't necessarily have a platform to speak out for themselves as well.
Yeah,
Kids are smart.
totally.
Yeah, kids are
Yeah.
smart. They're organizing already. And I have to ask, like, how do you even respond to those who argue that the banning of your book is justified either for moral or political reasons, or even unsuitable for certain audiences, especially since you have a child of your own? Like, how how do you even justify that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess there's kind of two sides of that. There's the individuals, who reach out, and then there's kind of that, I guess, the media attention and things like that, where it's on a broader scale. The individuals, I've noticed a really interesting trend, which is, a few years ago, I would get hate online, and it would be from anonymous accounts. You'd click on it, and it was obviously just a fake account that had been set up.
The egg.
Now, yeah, now you can click on an account and you see the picture of them with their kids, and it shows where they work and like their real name. And people aren't hiding this stuff
Mm,
anymore. Like, it's easy to see who they are. And those people, I mean, honestly, I do my absolute best just to accept it with some grace and just ignore and move on. Because I mean, especially the language that they use, you can tell that they're not even thinking for themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
have just they've heard stuff, and now they don't even feel comfortable enough to add their own thoughts to this discussion.
Mm.
They're just going to parrot something that they've heard, and add that into my world, and so it's kind of like I almost feel just pity, for them.
Mm.
I mean, to be so I don't know, in a place where you're leaving hate on anybody's stuff online. I mean, I can't even imagine doing that. Even leaving just like a really negative comment on something, like I just, I don't understand the space you'd have to be in to do that.
Yeah.
So I generally just kind of, this person must be really struggling, but when it comes to, media reports, or where it's kind of like pushing to a broader audience, that needs to be spoken against. That
Mm.
needs to have some truth brought to the situation. So, for example, when Katie was given notice of her being fired in the USA for reading one of my books, like that needed me to create a video with my thoughts about it, with the correct information. And most of the people, who parroting those sorts, they're never going to watch those videos.
No.
But for the people on the fence who are thinking, oh, is this inappropriate for kids? I don't know. I've never read the book. These people are saying it's inappropriate. Maybe it is. I have no idea. It's for them. It's for them to
Mm.
realize the truth of the situation.
Well, yeah, I was so shocked. Like most of these books haven't even been read.
Yeah.
I was, I looked into, the recent Anne Frank book being like removed from the class, and
I
people
haven't
calling
seen this. Sorry.
it's really shocking.
Is it
So
the Diaries of Anne Frank has been removed from?
yeah,
Wow.
so very
My goodness.
specifically, it's the graphic novel version, and I looked into it because I looked at the book. I got the copy of the book, and I know exactly the moment is literally it's a comic book, so it's just like literally one picture
Yeah.
of her exploring the idea of her sexuality. That is it, literally
Sure.
one
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
And they fired
And
the
everything.
teacher. Um,
Yeah.
just and so I'm gonna just flip the coin a bit and say,
Yeah.
do you believe that censorship is ever an appropriate response to any controversial or challenging ideas in literature?
In literature, no. Because firstly, you're making a choice to pick up this stuff and read it. Like it's
Mm,
your choice to read this stuff. We all have a right to read stuff that we enjoy. We all, as authors, have a right to write uncomfortable things.
mm,
And especially because if we want to create change, sometimes we need to dive into something that creates discomfort.
mhm.
We need to be able to explore a really uncomfortable topic, a really uncomfortable situation, through art. We need to be able to
Yeah.
do that. You know, sense. Look, I am not a fan of censorship, but I also believe that certain platforms have a responsibility
Mm,
to not promote hate and not promote misinformation. But I think there's a big difference between I have created a piece of art, that is there if you wish to interact with it, versus I am trying to create hate and sow division and like actually force people into this belief system. So I think they're very different things.
mm,
But you know to have a book ban, like I don't, there's so many wild children's books out there written from ideologies that I do not subscribe to.
mm.
um, and I don't want my child reading them, but I don't want them banned either. So like they can exist. I think they're gross, but they don't need to be banned.
Yeah.
Just don't read them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a place for all these books and something to learn from each of them, even if it's like this is the wrong way of doing something, or this is something in history you want to avoid.
Well, it's
You
funny
know,
because one of the biggest tools, I know as we as parents, one of our biggest tools in helping shape a value system is to show a value system that's in opposition to that,
yeah,
you know, and
exactly.
show how kind of not ridiculous is, but just how why we don't follow that same value system. So sometimes these books have a really important place in creating something different.
Yeah, it's so strange because, we've seen in history in different countries as well where suddenly there's a black market for these kind of books. And then younger
Yes.
people, they're savvy. They will go get hold of it. If you tell them don't read it, they'll read it. It's, like we've seen that in Iran. You've got a whole class of young people who will try and get hold of this literature. So I don't understand how banning it would actually I feel like it'll have a counteractive sort of
I
response
feel
to it.
as though it always has that counteractive
Yeah.
response, but also, I mean, what year are we in? Like,
Yeah, I know.
if do they think that like kids are sneaking out of their houses, to read books?
I
Like,
know. This is like a
it,
footloose situation,
you
where
know, like, we're in the age of social media and like, actual things that like we can worry about, and books are the things that we're focusing on. Like,
yeah.
it feels very out of touch.
Yeah, yeah, no, a big distraction for sure. And but obviously, your book obviously contributes to really important questions about social issues. So, what do you hope your readers will take away from it?
I really want readers to see themselves in my books, perhaps in a way that they haven't seen themselves before. But mostly, I really want kids who were like me, who did
Mm.
see themselves like I'm a white straight cisgender dude. If anybody has media about them, it's me. I can look at almost any piece of media on earth and find myself in it.
Mm.
And I want the kids who were like me, who really only saw themselves in media. I want them to see people not like themselves. I
Mm.
want them to see different belief systems. I want them to see different genders. I want them to see different races, all sorts of different people, so that they get a little more empathy.
Mm.
They understand that those are people with just as much value as they are. Because when you see yourself all the time, there's this subconscious kind of message that you are the important one in society. You know,
Mm.
and to show them that other people are valuable and just as important as them, I think is a really important piece that I
Yeah,
hope my books do. Yeah. But also,
absolutely.
those books, My Shadow is Pink and My Shadow is Purple, are books that are often read with a parent, and I
Mm.
would love it to open up questions that would usually not get asked. You know, so one of the most common questions after reading those books is, well, what color do you think your shadow is? And there is a certain level of weight in that question, uh,
Mm.
and there's a certain level of context, subcontext in that question that we often wouldn't enter into a conversation with our kids
Yeah.
about, and to give that space, that open, accepting space. If we've read that book, you're obviously pretty open and accepting, to give that space to open that conversation, I think is a really important, beautiful thing.
Absolutely. You're right. I don't think, especially when you're that young, it's hard to have the vocabulary for it as well, which is why these kind of books are so important. And well, yeah, Scott, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to me about this because it is just ridiculous. And again, it's a great book, and it shouldn't have got to this point where teachers are getting fired over it. I think it's just absolutely ludicrous. And so yeah, Ban Books Week, here we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, thank you so much for speaking to me, Scott, and I hope to see more of your books come out. In response to all of this. So please do keep in touch.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, good luck with everything.
Thank you.